Welcome to Expressions of Leadership. I'm your host, Michele Kawamoto Perry. In every episode, we explore how people from educators and artists to executives and entrepreneurs lead with authenticity, rise through adversity, and share the wisdom they've gained along the way. Today's guest is a lifelong educator whose leadership journey spans nearly 4 decades. Beginning as a math teacher and ultimately serving as head of school of Crossroads School for the Arts and Sciences, one of the most respected and forward-thinking schools in the country. Along the way, he held a series of leadership roles that shaped not only curriculum and culture, but generations of students and educators. During his tenure, he led transformational initiatives that expanded access to education, strengthened financial aid, and created new learning spaces for students, while also establishing the school's Equity and Justice Institute to ensure the institution continued serving the greater good. Today, he continues that commitment to service as a nonprofit consultant supporting organizations and communities in Los Angeles. Bob, welcome to Expressions of Leadership. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Well, thank you, Michele. It's a pleasure to be here, and we should probably add that we have a personal connection as well, given that you are a former student of Crossroads, and I knew you way back when you were a student there.
Yes, indeed. We won't say how many years
No.
ago, but I was definitely fortunate to be a student at Crossroads and that you were a significant part of my former education.
And it's such a thrill for me, I have to tell you, to be here and have you interviewing me at this point in my life and at this point in your life as well, too, your professional life. So it's very exciting.
Absolutely. So I'd like to start by asking, how did you first become a teacher? And what was it about education that called you to that work?
It's an interesting question, and thank you for asking. I grew up in a very poor family. You know, my father had never finished eighth grade. My mother, I think, dropped out in 11th grade. And we lived in the housing projects in Chester, Pennsylvania. I went to really under-resourced public school. So school was not great for me. It was not a great experience. And when I went to college, and I was lucky, I didn't have the funds, to go to college. I received grants, I received scholarships, financial aid that allowed me to go. I was struggling with what I wanted to do, and I originally thought I wanted to be an architect. But I realized very quickly that my background was not strong enough in the arts and in other areas to make it as an architect. And so I started searching and thinking, well, what do I want to do with my life? And very quickly realized that what I wanted to do was make schools better for kids. You know, school was not a great experience for me, and could I somehow go back and make it better for students? And I remember when I met with my advisor in college, I told him, okay, I know what I want to do. I want to become a high school teacher. And he said to me, well, what do you want to teach? And I said, I would love to teach English. And, I'm an avid reader. I love literature. I would love to teach English. And I'll never forget this. He said, you can do that, but you will struggle finding a job because there are way more English teachers than there are jobs. And he asked me, he said, is there anything else you're good at? And I said, well, I'm very good in math as well. He said, you become a math teacher, you'll be able to find a job anywhere. And I guess I chose math because for me, it wasn't important what I was teaching. It was more important that I was teaching students. And for me, it was about changing lives. And I thought, okay, I'll become a math teacher. And that's what started me on my educational journey.
And you've also shared that growing up, there were teachers who made a profound difference in your life. What did you learn from them about the kind of educator and leader that you wanted to be?
The teachers I remember were the teachers who just showed me in their own way that they cared about me, that they saw me, and that they were interested in me. And it didn't take much. It was just a simple conversation, pulling me aside, checking in, how are you doing? And that's all it needed to be for me to think that, okay, they care about me. They care about my well-being. I'm going to do well in school because of that for them. And it's funny, fast forward many, many years later, I remember attending alumni reunions at Crossroads, and often alumni would come up to me and say, Bob, I just have to tell you something. When I was struggling in your class or going through a difficult time in my life, you said this to me and it made all the difference in the world. And Michelle, often I would have no recollection of that conversation, but it was that moment I realized, in those small conversations a teacher can have with the students can make all the difference in the world. And that happened for me on a few occasions, and enough to make a difference for me. And my hope is that that also happened for the students I taught as well.
And you began your career teaching in Connecticut.
Yes.
What were those early years like, and what did they teach you about leadership before you even had the title?
Well, first and foremost, you realize very quickly as a young teacher, when you walk into that classroom and close the door, you're a leader. You have an incredible amount of autonomy. You're establishing the tone. You have a vision for what the class is going to be like. You're now responsible for a whole group of students. And so leadership is thrust upon you, well, almost whether you're ready for it or not. And I was somewhat ready, but I remember struggling a bit with classroom control, as many new teachers do, right? And there were a few students, or more than a few students, who challenged me and openly defied me, and I couldn't figure out how to deal with that. And you very quickly learn punishing them isn't the answer because they just up the ante, right? And they'll do it some more. And so what I discovered, I think almost accidentally, but I trusted my instincts, was to sit down with them and have a conversation with them and tell me what's going on for you. And I noticed in class you've been acting this way. Where's that coming from? And again, it was my showing that I was interested in them, not their behavior, but really who they were and what was going on for them. Started to make a difference. And so I had to be creative. I remember one student in particular who was always challenging me, and yet I knew he was struggling, and I couldn't figure out what the answer was. And then one day I said to him, I said, I could use a TA in my class, and this is a seventh grader, right? And I said I could use a TA in the class. Would you be willing to kind of help me and teach the class sometimes? And he loved it, Michelle, and it turned him around. And to this day, he talks about what a difference that made for him. So I think what I learned on the job was you had to sit down with each student and figure out what was the key for them. What was the key that would unlock that door and open up the possibility for learning and for them being interested in the curriculum.
And then later came a pivotal moment, and that was your decision to move to Los Angeles.
Mhm.
What inspired that move, and how did it shape both your professional path and your personal journey?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. So it was 1983. I had been teaching in Westport, Connecticut. It was a great public school, very well resourced, great staff. I'd been teaching there for a few years. I was 20, all of 25, and just beginning to come out as a gay man. And at that time, there were no openly gay teachers anywhere in the district that I was aware of, let alone neighboring districts. It was a hard time to be gay, and so I was trying to get up the courage to talk to my department chair to let him know that I was gay, and would that be a problem? Because I was about to get tenure in the school as well. And while I was trying to get up the nerve to tell Frank about this, my department chair, I remember reading an article in the local newspaper, the Fairfield News, I think it was called, about a guidance counselor in a neighboring school district who was fired when the superintendent found out that she was a lesbian. And I remember thinking, I can't risk my career. I don't want to risk coming out and then finding out that I was going to lose my job. And so I didn't know what to do at the time. And I had two good friends from college, a married couple who had both moved to LA. Jim wanted to be a screenwriter, and they were the first people I'd actually come out to, and they were great on my journey there, and very very supportive. And Mary said to me, he said, come out to LA. There's a big gay community here. It's a much more accepting environment. I think you'll be happier here. So I made the tough decision to not sign my contract and come out to LA. And my original thought was I would teach in the public school system here. I was a public school kid. I only knew public schools. I knew nothing about the independent school world. And as I was looking at LAUSD and talking to people in the district office there, I wasn't quite sure if this was the right fit for me. And so I started looking at the want ads in the newspaper and answered, excuse me, a want ad for a small private school in Santa Monica looking for a math teacher. So I went in for my interview, and I was interviewed by a man named Steve Morgan, a much beloved educator at Crossroads, who was openly gay. And I remember thinking, if there's a school here where the administrator is openly gay, it's probably a place where I can be myself, I can be safe, and not have to worry about being fired for who I am. So I took the job at Crossroads, and the rest is history, as they say.
And you've spoken openly about eventually deciding to reveal that you were gay. What did that moment of authenticity mean for you as a leader, and how did it influence how you showed up for others?
It was hard, I remember I had a psychologist friend years later who told me that it's not unusual for people who identify as LGBT to go back into schools and to work in schools because that's often where a lot of the pain and hurt started for them, and they want to make it better. And yet, when they go back into the school, they're reminded of that, and all of a sudden they feel the challenge of coming out and what does that look like and what's the risk going to be involved. And so even at a school at Crossroads, I was a little cautious. I was coming out to colleagues who were fine, but I didn't quite know how to handle students, although I think most of my students suspected. But I remember very vividly, and it was such a great moment. I was chaperoning the school prom, and when we chaperoned the prom, everyone would bring their spouse, their partner, a guest. And so I brought my then partner with me to the prom. And, we were all there as a big group. And there was one student, I remember his name, David, and he came up to me and introduced me to his date. And he then said to me, Bob, where's your date? Did you bring anyone? And it was that moment of truth, Michele, like, do I come out and introduce him to my date, or do I kind of, skirt the question? And fortunately, I said, "Oh, David, this is Charles, my date, my partner." And without missing a beat, he shook Charles's hand. Nice to meet you. The sky didn't fall. It was easy. And I thought, what was the big deal, at Crossroads? Now, I don't want to dispute the fact that for many people it is still a big deal, right? In many schools they can't do that in this country still today, believe it or not. But I was fortunate enough that it wasn't a big deal at Crossroads, and so in my doing that, it allowed me to realize I can be who I am. I don't need to hide. I don't need to change pronouns. I don't need to not share details, appropriate details about my personal life, with faculty, with students, as they come up. And it was very freeing. And I think it made me a better teacher as a result of that.
We've been talking about the early chapters of Bob's journey, from becoming a teacher to finding a place where he could lead with authenticity and purpose. After the break, we'll explore how that journey evolved and how Bob went from the classroom to leading an entire institution. Stay with us. Leadership isn't just about strategy, it's about people. The Forward Project helps organizations cultivate strong, adaptable leaders who create thriving workplace cultures. If you're ready to invest in your leadership team, visit www.theforwardproject.co to learn how. You're listening to Expressions of Leadership. I'm Michele Kawamoto Perry, and today we're in conversation with Bob Riddle, longtime educator and former head of school at Crossroads School for the Arts and Sciences, whose leadership helped shape a culture grounded in relationships, empathy, and opportunity. Now, Bob, you spent nearly 4 decades at Crossroads, moving from teacher to academic dean to division director to assistant head and ultimately head of school.
Mhm.
Looking back, What were the key turning points in that leadership journey?
Well, I first should probably say that I never intended to become a leader. You know, my original goal, my trajectory was to be a dean, which is the equivalent of a guidance counselor in independent schools. I wanted to work with students and I wanted to help support students. Remember, you know, my what I originally talked about when I first became a teacher, and that was why. And I loved being an academic dean. But in at Crossroads and at most independent schools, academic deans are not only working directly with students, but they're also helping to run the school. And so I was given a lot of leadership opportunities when I became dean. But let me backtrack for a second to tell you when I first got to Crossroads in the early '80s. It was a young school. It was only 12 years old. It was, as one teacher described it, ratty around the edges. The trains didn't always run on time, but it had a philosophy that really spoke to me, and that's what kept me there. But I remember at the end of my first year, I was pretty frustrated with some of the things that weren't working particularly well. So I took it upon myself to write a 4-page, single-space, typewritten letter to the head of school and the head of the middle school, laying out all the things that I thought was wrong with Crossroads. Imagine this 25-year-old who just came to the school and is giving them this list. They didn't fire me. And in fact, I got a beautiful letter from them thanking me for the input, letting me know that many of those things they were working on and they would like my support and help in seeing those things happen. So they were giving me an opportunity to kind of put my money where my mouth was, so to speak, and to help them with that. And so I was involved. I started joining committees and started getting involved in other projects at the school, and realized I was really good at that. I really enjoyed doing that aspect of it and helping with the running of the school. And so when the academic dean position came up, I had some of the faculty members who really believed in me and who vouched for me and thought I should be the right person to be the dean. When the upper school director position opened up, Roger Weaver, who was the head of school at the time, he succeeded Paul, believed in me and thought I was the right person for the job. When the assistant head position opened up, he did the same thing. So I think that it was that initial step of, saying, I want to help. Here are some things I see, let's work on this together. And they said, sure, we want you to then giving me the opportunities to step into these leadership roles. But even then, Michelle, I never in a million years thought I would be head of school. That was just something that just felt way beyond me. I didn't think I had the capacity to do that. I was in awe of my two predecessors and everything they had done. But I attended actually, I was lucky enough in the mid 90s, I received a fellowship to study at Columbia University Teachers College. It was for independent school educators, and it was focused on leadership in independent schools. And their kind of somewhat hidden agenda was to develop young leaders who would eventually become heads of school. And so that's when the idea first started percolating in me. Well, that maybe this is something I could do somewhere, but I always thought it would be somewhere else, not at a school like Crossroads. And then when Roger announced he was retiring, he sat me down and he said, I told the board that I think you should be my successor, and they want to interview you. And I was, flabbergasted, stunned, grateful, and the next thing you know, they're offering me the job.
And what helped you be successful as a leader?
Uh, the people around me. I was very, very lucky. First of all, I had an incredible board of trustees. It was pretty big when I started. I think we had 29 people on the board my first couple of years. But to a person, they were all incredibly supportive of me, of my vision, and they wanted to see me succeed. And they worked tirelessly with me to help make that happen. I had a great administrative team. Roger had left many, many strong people in place when he stepped down, and then a few vacancies opened up. I hired a few others. And that team, we met on a weekly basis for 3 hours, and then I met with them individually every week. And they became my counselors, my sounding board. When I had an idea, I would throw it out to them. Often they would say, "Bad idea, Bob. We're not going to do that." But sometimes they would say, "You know what? There's a lot of merit in that idea. Let's polish it and make it better." And so my admin team was great. And then the last thing, Michelle, the Crossroads community, the parent body, the student body, the alumni body were all incredibly supportive. And I think because of my history at the school, I think they all also wanted to see me succeed as well too. So I had so much support from the beginning, and I think that helped me become a better leader.
And now every leader develops a philosophy over time. I'm
Mm.
curious, how would you describe your philosophy of leadership?
So there's a simple one, I think, and it kind of again it goes back to my own experience as a student, but it was leading with empathy. I felt that first and foremost, my job was to lead with empathy, and I think related to that was to lead without ego. The work was not about me. It was about the students. It was about the school. It was about the mission of the school. And I was in service of that. And so I hope that in every encounter I had, every decision I made, every meeting I spoke at, that those two qualities came across, that it was coming from a place of empathy, and that there was no ego here. It was not about me and what I believed in. Um, I think related to that, I also learned very quickly, and again, much of this was from watching my predecessors, was to lean heavily on my team, lean heavily on the board, and lean heavily onto my admin team. I trusted that many of them were smarter than I was, and to listen to them, to listen to their good ideas, to push back, if we didn't always agree, but we could have good, healthy conversations about what was best for the school. And we knew that it was always coming from that place. Again, it wasn't coming from a place of ego or somebody wanting to just sort of draw a line in the sand. It was really about what's best for students, what's best for the school.
And what were your non-negotiables as a leader?
Non-negotiables. Well, first and foremost, the school had a very, very, and still does, has a very strong and clear philosophy. It was a philosophy that was created in 1971 when it was founded, and is virtually unchanged. There have been a few minor tweaks to it, but it was virtually unchanged. And so it was my job. The non-negotiable here was to make sure everything we did, every decision we made, was in support of that philosophy. There were five founding tenets of the school philosophy that I was to share if I could, and they were to academic excellence, to the arts, to the greater community, to a student population of racial, social, and economic diversity, and to the development of each student's physical well-being and full human potential. We said that every day we talked about that's what we believed in. And one of the things that I believe set us apart from many other schools is we believe those were equally important. We were not a school that it was academics first and everything else was secondary. And it was my job as the head of school to make sure that those five founding commitments were fully reflected in the experiences that students had each and every day in their classes, on the playing field, in their clubs, in their extracurricular activities, that's what students experience and that's what they saw. So that was the big non-negotiable for me. The other one was what's best for students. We are there to serve students. We are there to support students, to help them be the best that they can be. So again, every decision we made was looking at what's in service of students, what's gonna be best for them. And so those were probably my two non-negotiables.
And when you stepped into this role as head of school, you weren't just managing a school, you were managing and stewarding an institution. What was the vision that you held for Crossroads, and how did you translate that vision into action?
Yeah, great question. First of all, I don't think I fully realized until I stepped into the role how complex the institution was, and still is. We had, at the time I was there, close to 1,200 students, 400 employees, over 5,000 alumni, 800 families, a big board. Our operating budget was roughly $50 million, I think, when I was head of school. And we were on two campuses, K through 12. There was a lot. There was a lot there to manage. And fortunately, I didn't have to manage all of that. I had other people on the team who were able to do that. But my job was to support them in the work that they were doing. So first and foremost, I needed to support them because they were the boots on the ground, making sure the school was running smoothly every day. At the same time, the board and the faculty were looking to me to say, okay, what's your vision for the school? And yes, we have this philosophy, but what does that philosophy look like in the 21st century? And what are the things that we're doing might need to be tweaked? What are the things that we're doing might need to be changed completely? And how should our program evolve as the world is evolving? And so, again, my first task was to sit down with faculty, with parents, and with alumni to listen to them and hear from them about what was important to them and what that should look like. So I think it was through those conversations I realized that some of our programs were great, didn't need any tweaking at all. Others needed some work, and that we needed to focus some of our time and energy and resources on improving them or tweaking them or whatever it might be. At the same time, what the board gave me permission to take risks and think big. And so and in fact, and challenged me to do that. And so we started thinking about what are the ways in which if what we've got is working pretty well and it's the kind of education that we think all students deserve, how do we find a way to expand that beyond the Crossroads borders? And we began to think about what are the ways we can make sure that more students have those same opportunities. That was a hard thing to try and make happen. And we did it in small ways, opening up our summer programs and really expanding those to people from outside the community. And then going into other schools and talking to them about programs that they might want to implement that were similar to what we had, such as life skills, which was one of our signature programs. So it was really about looking at how we can expand the impact that Crossroads was having beyond just our own student body. And that was exciting and daunting and scary, but it was a great kind of vision for us to have, and that's how the Equity and Justice Institute you mentioned kind of came to be. One of my favorite stories about Crossroads was in the mid '80s when we were a young school, not a lot of resources ourselves. We didn't even own our campus. Paul Cummins, our founder, had gone to visit some other schools, including public schools, and he discovered that many of the schools were having their arts funding cut, and were having to cancel all of their arts classes because the state was having a budget crisis, and they somehow thought that the arts were expendable. And in one sort of fit of generosity, Paul said to one principal, "Tell you what, I'm going to loan our choral teacher to you. We will pay her salary so that you can continue your choral program there." And out of that moment, he realized that we were a school that had a lot to offer, and shouldn't we be supporting schools that might have less? And so he created a program that's now called PS Arts, and it's been around for more than 30 years, that provides fully funded arts instruction to public schools throughout Southern California and even the center of the state. And so seeing that, I realized that's an example of the school serving the greater good. How do we make sure that the school always does that? And so the idea of the Equity and Justice Institute came from that, to say that if we can make sure two things: one, that every decision that we're making at the school is looked at through the lens of equity and justice, number one, and number two, if we are always looking for opportunities to serve the greater good, that really is at the core of what we're about as a school. And so we raised the money to endow the program, to endow the position, so that it would always be part of Crossroads in perpetuity. It could never be cut out of its budget, and to ensure that the school would always be having an impact in the world.
And there are some really fantastic sessions and lectures that are coming out of that institute that anyone can attend.
They're free and open to the public, and you can find them on the Crossroads website. So yes, and that was one of the goals, was to, here's a way we can help promote ideals, educate the greater community through the Institute speaker series.
Well, we've been talking about the leadership journey and the vision and discipline it takes to lead institutions through growth and change. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll explore some of the toughest decisions leaders face and what it means to lead with courage when not everyone agrees with you. Don't go anywhere. True transformation starts from within. The Forward Project partners with organizations to create meaningful culture shifts and develop leaders who inspire real change. If your team is ready to move forward with purpose, visit www.theforwardproject.co. Welcome back to Expressions of Leadership. I'm Michele Kawamoto Perry, and today we're talking with Bob Riddle about leadership, courage, and the responsibility that comes with guiding communities through change. Now, Bob, I'd like to talk about challenges. What were some of the biggest challenges that you faced during your time as head of school, and how did you navigate them?
I think for most leaders in the last 5 or 6 years, one of the biggest challenges was COVID. We knew that there was going to be a period when school might be closed. And so we started the preparation work, I think in early February of 2020, talking to teachers about online learning and what that might look like. And it would only be temporary. And so we at least had a little bit of a head start. But even with that, we were surprised at how soon we needed to close the school. It happened about, 3 or 4 weeks earlier than we expected. And it happened for a whole lot longer than we expected. And all of a sudden, you're running a school remotely it was a good year, I think, at least, when LA County was one of the strictest, and I appreciate them being so strict to protect everybody. But we were required to be closed for virtually a year. And it was hard. It was hard to create the kind of programming that still worked for students. And imagine doing Zoom classes for kindergartners every day, recipe for disaster. It just didn't work. And it was a testament to our teachers, who were so incredibly creative. We had drive-bys where teachers were there dropping off kits for parents to take home with their kids, to work with them on some of the lessons when they were trying to be on Zoom. I mean, our teachers were amazing. But at the same time, there was a lot of fear, and a lot of uncertainty and a lot of unknown. And in moments like that, people are looking to the leader for answers. And I didn't have any. I had the same questions and uncertainties that they did. So I remember a lot of very heartfelt Zoom meetings I did and recordings that I did for the community. And Michele, I think that was a point at which I realized the role of a leader, and particularly a leader in an independent school, can often be pastoral in the sense that, they're looking to you for comfort. They're looking to you for making some sense out of the world, and out of the world that we're currently living in. And they wanted me to do that. And I learned that I could do it in a very human way, sharing what I didn't know, but also letting people know that we were going to get through this. We were a strong community, and reminding them of all the creative things that we've been able to do in spite of the lockdown we were going through. I think the other challenges you face are there's there's a joke among school heads that we're expected to be God on a good day, and you can't, right? You're always going to disappoint people. You're always going to let people down. And I think what I learned is if I can continue to express empathy, be as transparent as possible. So whenever a decision was being made that may have been a difficult decision, and may not play well for certain people, I tried to be as transparent as I possibly could about those decisions and where they came from. Now, that was often complicated when the decision involved personnel or students, where you really can't be as transparent. You need to respect confidentiality. But you hope at that point you've built up enough trust within the community that they trust that you've made the right decision, and support you in it.
Well, speaking of potentially difficult decisions, one of the most talked about decisions during your leadership was the move to stop offering AP classes. What did that experience teach you about leading large scale change and mobilizing a community around a shared vision?
Well, I'll tell you, there's the great story about how that came to be. When I was upper school director, and even when I was working in the upper school, round about every March or April, there would be a faculty meeting where faculty would start complaining about their AP classes. And the complaint usually was something like this, I have to stop doing labs. I have to stop doing discussions for the next 2 months. I need to prepare everybody for this standardized test that they're going to take, this high stakes test in May, that I have no control over. And this is not good teaching at all. This is all about rote memorization, and that's not who we are. And I remember at one of those faculty meetings, a very brave teacher, although I can't remember who it was, stood up and said, "Why are we doing this? Why are we offering APs? If we can offer better teaching and a better curriculum to our students, shouldn't we be doing that?" And I felt in that moment, Michelle, like, uh-oh, what do I do? Because she's right, And so I said, you know what? Let's talk about it. Let's research it. Because maybe there is an alternative. And if there is an alternative, we should be looking at that. And so we spent the next couple of years doing the hard research. And so the first lesson I learned was research is important, and take your time with the research. There were some people who were wanting us to make this decision yesterday. And I was like, no, we're not ready. We need to, first of all, we need to look at what would we offer in place of APs? What would those courses look like? And secondly, we had to look and see how would this impact college admissions? And to that end, we sent a letter to the 200 deans of admissions at the schools that most of our students applied to and were admitted to. And we asked the question, would this be a problem if Crossroads no longer offered advanced placement classes that were offered by the College Board, but instead we offered our own internally designed college level courses, but that were not test driven? And we got the results back, and we made sure every single university replied to us. And 198 of the 200 said to us, not a problem. We know your students. We know the kind of education Crossroads is offering. And in fact, there were a couple of universities said, we will support you in this decision if you need us to go on the record supporting you with this. And that was very heartening. And we weren't very concerned about the two that said it would be a problem. They were not schools that many of our students went to. So then we needed to roll it out with the community. And so then we had to have a series of meetings with the community. And again, there was a lot of anxiety about it. But because we had done our research, we were able to show them what the colleges had told us, the kinds of classes we could be offering. And, we were not the first school to have made this decision. Some schools on the East Coast had already made this decision. And so we had a lot of listening sessions, discussions, and that lasted for, I think, about a year. And at that point, we felt like, okay, we're ready to make this decision. And beginning with, the next year's class, there were no longer going to be any APs. By that time, it had been well communicated. Everybody knew about it. But we were still a little nervous, So our first graduating class How would they do? The college admissions profile that year was great, was strong. But the most amazing thing was that one of those two schools that had said it would be a problem admitted two of our students that year without any APs on the transcript. So we knew it was the right decision. And it was the best decision because it allowed teachers to do what they do well. It allowed learning to be what it should be, not rote memorization, not preparation for a test. That classes were no longer an inch deep and a mile wide, but it was really about depth, and discussion. And it really improved our curriculum in the 11th and 12th grade years. It also improved our admissions profile of families applying to Crossroads too.
Let's take another short break. And when we come back, we'll turn to a different kind of transition, stepping away from a role that has defined so much of Bob's life. Are you looking to connect with an audience passionate about leadership, growth, and success? Become a sponsor of Expressions of Leadership and align your brand with inspiring conversations that make an impact. Contact us at letstalk@expressionsofleadership.com to explore sponsorship opportunities. This is Expressions of Leadership. I'm Michele Kawamoto Perry, and today we're reflecting on leadership transitions with Bob Riddle from teacher to head of school, and now into a new chapter of service. So, Bob, you spent 37 years at one institution, which is remarkable in and of itself. What was it like to retire from that role of head of school?
It was harder than I thought, and everybody warned me that it was going to be hard. On the one hand, I was ready. I was ready to move on. I felt like I had accomplished everything that I wanted to accomplish. And I also thought that the timing was right for the school as well, for another leader to come in. Um, but I wasn't quite prepared for the now what, moment. I just figured things would fall into my lap and my life would be great. And I was like, no, I got to figure out what I want to do with these years of my life. So I did a lot of soul searching. I did a lot of reading, and then it was in a conversation with a parent at the school. He and his wife had started a nonprofit called the J3 Foundation that was created to support students in fourth grade who have fallen behind in their reading. And the J3 Foundation was started when they saw an alarming statistic that for students who fall behind in fourth grade, particularly students in underserved communities and schools, they have a 2/3 more likely chance of ending up incarcerated or on welfare as adults. And that was an alarming statistic. And they said, we want to change that. And so they started this nonprofit and started hiring reading coaches to go in to Title I schools, working with kids whose test scores identified them as below reading level to try to bring them up to reading level. And Joe and Jamie approached me and they said, we want to do this not just here in LA, but we want to do this in other cities as well. Can you help us do that? And I thought I would love to. I would love to do that. And what I realized, Michele, is that while my entire career was in schools and working in education, our school was a nonprofit. And I learned a lot about board governance. I certainly learned a lot about fundraising. I learned a lot about programming, organizational structure. And all of that was transferable to the nonprofit world in other disciplines, other fields as well. And so I spent a year working with J3, helping them to expand the work that they were doing here in LA, hire an executive director, build a bigger board, and then begin to think about, moving into a second city. And that really excited me because I felt like I was able to take all the lessons that I had learned at Crossroads, many of them things no one had ever taught me, and I could support another nonprofit. And I thought, well, maybe this is the kind of thing that would be continue to feed my soul in this new chapter of my life. And so soon after I finished that work with J3, the fires happened in LA. And I think we all sat there in horror watching them happen and feeling helpless. Like, what can we do? We've never seen so much devastation and destruction on such a large scale in our own community. How can we help? And so, literally 2 or 3 days after that happened, the fires happened, I was approached by the Pacern Family Foundation. They had heard about the work I was doing with J3, and they said, we want to do something to support people who were impacted by the fires. Can you meet with us and talk about what people need? And so, out of that conversation, we talked about how at that moment, people were just trying to figure out, do they rebuild? I need to find housing. I need to find a school for my child because they lost their school as well. They're dealing with insurance issues. But no one was talking about the trauma that everyone had experienced. And what we know about trauma is trauma doesn't go away. It lives in your body. And at some point, they are going to need to find a way to deal with that trauma. And so we came up with this big idea of creating a center that would bring people together because they lost that center when their communities burned down, but that would also provide free counseling and free arts programming. And I brought PS Arts in to do the arts programming for them. And we called it the Palisades Community Renewal Center. So I think it was working with J3 and then the Pacern Foundation. It's just led to more and more wanting to support other nonprofits as well, and it's allowing me to continue to do good in the world. I feel like when when I stepped down working at Crossroads, I thought, well, I've never worked in the for-profit world. Maybe I should see what that's like and dabble in that. But I realized, A, I know very little about that, and B, my heart is in nonprofit work, and so this has been a good chapter since retiring from Crossroads.
Now, you also helped launch a national nonprofit called Pave Her Way to support women and girls pursuing leadership opportunities.
Mm.
Why was that mission important to you?
For so many reasons, as a white male, I'm so aware of my privileges and the privileges that I've had in my life. I remember when I became head of school, my cohort of new heads that year, so this would have been 2009, not that long ago. There were 60 of us in this cohort, and only a handful were people of color, and an even smaller handful were women. And that was quite stunning to me that in 2009, most of the leaders of schools at that time were white men. And so I've always wanted to find a way to promote leadership opportunities for everyone, including people of color and for women. And the founders of Pave Her Way reached out to me. And I think they were pretty frustrated that it's been nearly impossible for us to elect a woman president in the US, let alone see women in leadership roles in the Senate and in the House, although that's slowly getting better. They thought, what does a woman have to do to become a leader in this country? And so they approached me and said, we want to create a nonprofit that identifies the obstacles that get in the way for women and remove those obstacles out of their way so that they can be the best leader in whatever field they're in, whether it's political or education or the arts. So it was very exciting for me because it spoke to who I am and what I believe in. And it was very exciting to be able to create something from scratch, just as the Palisades Community Renewal Center was. When I inherited Crossroads had been around for 40 plus years when I became head of school. It was in great shape, didn't need a whole lot of changing, but it was a pretty, established institution. The Palisades Community Renewal Center and the Pave Her Way, it was a blank slate, and so it gave us all the opportunity to envision, to dream, create, and hopefully get it right the first time. So I had a great 8 months working for them. They've hired their inaugural executive director, who was amazing. She's going to set the world on fire, and I'm excited to see the work that they're going to be doing in the world.
Well, how do you decide what projects to take on now?
They need to speak to me. It has to be something that speaks to me, and my own personal values and beliefs. And it also has to be something that I believe where I can be helpful. I've turned down a few where I just felt like I don't think I can be as helpful as you'd like me to be or need me to be for that project too. And projects I've been getting have all been word of mouth. I don't advertise. I don't have a website. I probably should. I am on LinkedIn, so a few people find me there, but a lot of it's just been word of mouth.
Well, we're going to take one last short break. And when we return, we'll look ahead to Bob's vision for the future and the legacy he hopes to leave. Don't miss a thing. Follow Expressions of Leadership on your favorite podcast app and connect with us on Instagram and YouTube at Expressions of Leadership. Welcome back to Expressions of Leadership. I'm Michele Kawamoto Perry, and today we're concluding our conversation with Bob Riddle, reflecting on the future of leadership and the impact one person can have across generations. Bob, when you think about the future of education, what gives you hope?
Okay, so I have to be honest here. I've always been a very hopeful, optimistic person. It's been a little harder to be hopeful and optimistic these last few years, given all that's going on in the world and in our country, and just the divisiveness, right? It's really challenging to see. And yet, I think what still continues to give me hope is what I saw in the young faculty who we hired in my last few years, who are coming in with brave new ideas about what school could look like and what schools could be for kids. These are the teachers who are going to be the future leaders, not just at Crossroads, but at elsewhere. These are the teachers who are going to inspire so many students. And and students always give me hope. The one thing that was a constant throughout my career, no matter what role I had, was the ways in which students challenged me and challenged me to be better, challenged me to do better. And I know that will always happen, and that is happening. And so that gives me a lot of hope as well.
And when you look back on nearly 4 decades of leadership, shaping institutions, building programs, developing people, what do you hope your legacy will be?
This may sound silly, Michelle, but my hope, really, my legacy is that there were students that I taught, or there were students that I interacted with, during my time as an administrator, as a dean, or students who were at Crossroads when I was head of school, who feel like they were seen, they were heard, and that somehow I was able to make a difference for them that you know made their learning that much better, made their lives that much better, that perhaps inspired them to do what they're doing in the world today.
And if listeners want to learn more about you or your work, where should they go?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, so people can find me on LinkedIn. As I mentioned, I don't have a website, but I also hope people will look at the Crossroads website and take a look at the amazing things that the school is continuing to do today under its current leadership. And I'm so proud of that school and proud to have been a part of it for the many years I was there.
Well, now it's time for our wisdom and whimsy segment of the show, where I get to ask the guest one advice question and one fun question. So, starting with the advice question, what advice would you give to educators stepping into leadership roles today?
Be yourself. You were hired to be who you are. Surround yourself by smart people and lean on them. Make sure you have a strong board, make sure you have a strong admin team, but also spend time listening to teachers and listening to students. They are going to be the ones who will tell you what needs to be done in the school and even how to do it. So those are going to be your best advisors. I also learned early on, Michelle, the value of working with a consultant. And I had during my tenure, I had an organizational a consultant who was great, and she was really instrumental in helping me kind of sort through all the chatter and all the noise I was hearing, and help kind of reaffirm our values and my values and the school's values and where we needed to go. And I don't know, without her support and without the support of a great board chair, I don't know that I would have been as successful as I was as head of school. So get a great consultant and make sure you have a great board chair as well.
And now for the fun question. What is the best perk of retirement that no one told you about?
The best perk. Well, I'll tell you, I I experienced something 3 or 4 weeks after I retired that I have never experienced before in my life. I woke up one morning and I was lying in bed and I thought, I don't know what day of the week it is. And it doesn't matter what day of the week it is. Michelle, it was the weirdest, strangest feeling. And it was so freeing, right? It's like our whole lives are dictated by a calendar and the day of the week and what's on our schedule. And to have that freed up, was just very liberating. Now in the consulting work I'm doing, I'm having meetings. I still have to keep a calendar, but there's still many days when I wake up and I don't know what day of the week it is, and it's pretty wonderful.
Sounds like heaven.
It is.
Well, Bob, thank you for your honesty and your courage and your lifelong commitment to creating communities where people feel seen and heard and valued. Your example demonstrates that leadership is not just about titles or decisions. It's really about relationships, integrity, and the courage to stand for what matters.
Absolutely. And thank you for all you're doing, Michelle, in spreading the good word about leadership. We all need it. And I have to tell you, as somebody who knew you as a student, I'm very proud of this great work that you're doing.
Well, thank you so much. That's very kind of you. And it means a lot to me. And to our listeners, if this conversation resonated with you, be sure to follow and subscribe to Expressions of Leadership wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also connect with us on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Until next time, I'm Michele Kawamoto Perry, reminding you that leadership starts with listening and grows through courage. If you haven't done so already, make sure to click on that follow button so you don't miss out on future episodes. Have a guest you'd like us to interview? Questions, ideas, or just want to say hello? You can reach us at letstalk@expressionsofleadership.com or connect with us on Instagram or YouTube. We'd love to hear from you. And as always, thanks to our amazing team behind the scenes for making this podcast possible, including our sound engineer, Graham Palmer, and my chief encourager and advisor, Jeremiah Higgins.